Welcome to a Leader's Journey podcast. I'm your host, Joel Gunn, and I have Mike Sharrow back with me on the show. Mike, thanks for being back.
It's fun to be back.
The last episode was a lot of fun, so I'm looking forward to this one. We were talking about another direction to go was everybody's still talking about generations in the workplace. It's probably a topic that's going to be with us for several more years.
As long as there are generations. I think every generation talks about
the previous generation.
The next one and the last one.
But we're at an interesting time because the boomers are staying in the workplace a lot longer than their parents did, and thankfully, I think it's good news. I saw a report recently that there was more teenagers applying for and holding summer jobs this year than in 14 years.
Please, we need that number to come up.
Yes, so that was exciting to see. So you've got at least 4 generations. I think we were figuring out in your office. What are your thoughts around your hopes and your concerns for future leaders?
Yeah, so I stepped down to the Gen 3 leader for not generation era, but I'm the 3rd generation leader for this organization. And even in the last 8 years, watching our average customer age change and our leadership age change, I actually have great hope. I think we could be critical of any generation. So every generation's got its sin issue and its flaw issue, and every generation's got its gift and counter strength. I would say at a macro level, even just we think about contrasting Gen X and millennials with boomers, which has been our primary focus group of our business for a long time. You got a healthy discontentment with the status quo, a healthy passion for making a difference. And the idea of delayed gratification is low, but that also means delayed significance, delayed purpose. And so I think all those things have actually been really positive for our mission. But as I look at the Gen Z, let's talk about that emerging generation. So millennials are becoming the largest workforce percentage-wise, and then Gen Z's following behind them, a smaller generation, but it's the next wave. I'm excited and concerned, just like I would be for every generation. I think the formation of Gen Z is so fundamentally different than previous ones. A big fan of the book, Anxious Generations. Have you read the book? Highly recommend it. Looking at uniquely what's happened that gave Gen Z a totally different upbringing, and particularly it's because they were raised with smartphones. It's just part of the reality. And so you see uncommon rates of suicide, of depression, of anxiety, all those different pieces. So the generation has been completely shaped by external factors. And I think what that has done that makes me nervous for the next. So I'm going to say what my nervousness is. I'm nervous for the next generation of leaders in that they have maybe an unrealistic expectation of pace of progress. Read a book a long time ago called Chrysalis that talked about, a butterfly has to be a larva, and then I think it's a pupa, and then a caterpillar, and then it goes in the cocoon, and it doesn't really do anything for a while, but it's actually a necessary time where it's strengthening. And if you were to crack that cocoon prematurely, to be like, come on, get out of there, like become a butterfly already, it would actually die. Like it needs that strengthening resistance time before it can then become this magnificent specimen of all this color and flight. And we're always guilty of assuming we're, of course, the butterfly, criticizing people before us, but wanting to skip stages. But if that larva tried to fly, it wouldn't work. If that caterpillar said, let's just skip the cocoon, sitting there doing nothing for weeks, why would I do that? You'd never get to the end. And so I think one of the risks right now is a generation shaped by seeing rapid, small bites of information, rapid assimilation, is a sense of, okay, I come to work and I want to be, CEO in 3 years. I should be in the dream house right away. There's this kind of, I want to skip to the end and not know those hard things. Like I've had 19 jobs and I liked a couple of them, but they were all necessary. They were all fruitful. They all made me stronger. I couldn't be who I am today if I skipped all the hard ones. And so I think the impatience could run the risk of missing how formation creates strength. I was talking with a young leader who had clear goals and dreams, and it's kind of like, how many more weeks is it going to take before I get to go there? I'm like, weeks. So let's think years. And not years of doing nothing, but like years of growing depth. And that was so counterintuitive is thinking about, as soon as you have to go through things at a pace. So that's one of my concerns. And then also the lack of mentors, the lack of I think I forget the percentage. A lot of kids are going to come out of families where they didn't have both parents, and if they did, they may not have had parents that were as engaged and showing them the way. They had less access to elders and wise people kind of showing you things. And so, if your primary source of information is rapid fire, kind of curated for you bits, you don't know the difference between perspective and data and wisdom and truth, and so that could create painful lessons. That could have leaders having to relearn things that we'd say is classical truth. It's just because no one ever showed them. So I think that those are some hazards that make me nervous. It also creates opportunity, and then I think it is a question for the generations that came before them to say, A, how come we did that to them? But B, how do we help them? And what is the opportunity then to help those leaders who bring in a great appetite for changing the world and don't know what they don't know?
I don't remember the exact year, but it was somewhere around 1990. Hillary Clinton had made a video that was being shared in corporations. And she was describing a future state where children with latchkey kids, is what we called them back then, would have absentee parents, and that corporations would actually have to train employees on basic, politeness and
values and
all these kinds of things. I think she was onto something. At the time, a lot of people discounted it, like, But do you think that's played out? Do you think there's some truth to that, or to what degree?
Yeah, I was just thinking about my own reaction when she said those things, and I think sometimes we hear a vision of the future and we react not wanting it because we go, that's not how it should be.
Right.
That's different than you could disagree all day long. That's not how it should be. Like as a parent, I go, gosh, it's my responsibility to raise my girls and to teach them character and ethics and experiences. But should is different than is. And the reality is we have to deal with the world that is. And I absolutely believe that we can either criticize and lament. And I think the danger is if you have contempt to a generation, if you're like, someone should have taught them. Well, one of my sayings from working in politics stuff actually has been this idea that Shirley is no longer here. When I've done some work in lobbying and activism, trying to get people involved in the democratic process, and when I find believers even and leaders who care deeply about our country or issues, I'd say, well, do you vote? Do you call your congressman? Do you do something? Like, no, because, surely common sense will prevail, and surely someone else is telling them, and surely they know this already. And there's all this like mythical them are surely doing things. And I spent enough time in D.C. that I came back and told people, I was like, hey, I've been in D.C. Shirley's not there. She left the building. There's just you and me. So if we don't do it, no one will. And I think the same thing can be true about society and generations. We can spend all day long being like, surely someone should have parented them better. Surely they should have known this and taken that course. Surely ain't here. It's just us. And so those people are showing up in your workplace. They're showing up in your community. They're showing up in your school. And if we don't choose to help them, then we're complicit with it. And so I do think Hillary was right. She said it takes a village to raise a child. And again, at the time, we're like, we shouldn't be abdicating parental responsibility and individual. Like, yes. But when that doesn't happen, and it shows up in your workplace, you can either be contemptuous to them, in which case you'll lose them and you'll further harm them. And the reality is that is the future of our country, or you can say, this is my opportunity to invest in people and grow people. And so I think it is a leadership challenge to choose a mindset and realize complaining about it doesn't do anything. So let's create it.
What are some of the best practices you've seen around this topic of, okay, these kids haven't got the training they were supposed to get, whether that be, open the door, be kind, the right way to argue, whatever.
Yeah.
What have you seen you're out in the marketplace a lot. What are you seeing companies doing that other companies could emulate?
So there's a renaissance of what previous generations may have called discipleship that more current generations maybe refer to as mentorship, but the appetite for mentorship programs is surging. And that, I saw a movie recently, The Forge, that even simulated that, where you have a young person who's just lacking some maturity.
He wasn't a bad kid. He just
good kid, good mom,
do what good kids do: play video games and play sports.
And needed to be called up to a higher vision of life, not be given a pass, but also be kind of shown the way. And it changed his life. It'll probably change his family's legacy. So I'm seeing businesses that go, we're going to put intentional character building programs. We're going to put mentorship. I know a mortgage company that literally said, hey, we're going to invite you to volunteer. Like, you got to come in early for work and put you through 48 weeks of an hour a week journey on discipleship, mentoring, life, all these different pieces, and having thousands of employees complete it. And they're not paid to. And people are like, why would they do that? Well, because everyone wants to be successful. No one wants to be a failure or limited. And we just don't know. We don't know. So it takes someone seeing that and saying, let me create a way for you to grow. We've put probably about 70% of our staff through a 16-week course around figuring out your purpose and your values and like where you're going in life and what matters and how you put things in place. I wouldn't be who I am today if there wasn't multiple people along the way who went, hey, I can see you're wanting to go somewhere. You need some things. I remember a defining job. I was in an entry-level role trying to get to another one, trying to make $1 an hour more, make the move. And this manager in the company comes and said, hey, we got this opportunity in this other department over here. Do you want to apply for that job? And I went, no, that's a boring job. I don't want that job. And weeks went by and he came by. He's like, hey, we're still hiring for that role. You ever thought about doing it? I was like, I don't want that job. He took me to lunch. He said, hey, why don't you apply for that job? I said, because it's not interesting and it's not what I want to do. And he said, yeah, but it has skills you need to learn. And he said, as a company, we want to see how will you handle doing something that's not just fun and all of your favorite things. Can you actually be effective and good and positive, and can you lead through that? You'll never get to be what you want to be until you've done some things like that. And he kind of cast a vision that led me to go do that job and grow through it. And so businesses that see potential, we've got a person on our team who's a rock star. She went to work, apply for a friend of mine's company a long time ago, and she was in college age, I think. And in the interview, he asked the classic, like, where do you want to be in 5 years? And she described some career that was not his business. And he's like, well, that's dumb. I'm not hiring you. You just said you don't want to work here in 5 years. She went and interviewed somewhere else, got hired, and then she became like the key person for them. And my buddy asked the CEO, hey, did you ask her what she wants to be? He's like, oh, yeah. He's like, did she tell you? And he went, yeah. He's like, then why did you hire her? And he went, what I heard is a young person who has ambition and zeal, but doesn't know what she doesn't know. And I went, you know what? I think I'm going to invest in you, grow you. And when you learn business, learn other things, your picture may actually change. I just saw potential. I didn't get hung up on what she saw specifically. And he's like, well, but if I knew she would have gotten her business degree and I would have kept her. Like, that's not fair. And he's like, you got to see potential and then grow it. And now we're the beneficiaries. She's doing great things for us. And she's not, her dream has changed 3 times. So,
you grew up in a large company, Fortune 50 or Fortune 100. I was privileged to come out of college into a Fortune 500, and I think one of the things they do well, at least my experience, and hopefully, well, tell me how yours was. They did this really well. Like, there was fast track programs into management. There was looking out for that person that speaks up in meetings. Look, put this person as a team lead, how that team performed, put them in charge of this, right? They were, and these, mine was a 100-year-old company, yours also.
Yeah.
There's a reason they're a 100-year-old large company, is because they figured that out. Is that duplicatable? Can the small businesses do that kind of stuff? And if so, how have you seen that work?
That's a great question, because it's also when I've made mistakes where I've been overly ambitious or aspirational, and like what our appetite or capacity was to do those kind of things. Because when you got these big firms, you've got bench depth. You've got roles where you've got 10, 20, 30, 50, 500 people doing something. You can graft in folks and kind of absorb that and rally around it. You go to a small business, you may have a bench depth of 1 or 2, and then it's pretty hard if you bring someone in. Like, you have to ask the question, who's going to be able to teach that? And so it's difficult to do. It's difficult to have the same level of training development of 1,000-person company when you got a 20-person company. Mm-hmm. So I think differentiating what's your skill training for the job versus maybe character and life and in other pieces. At least I've found in our business cases, our appetite or capacity to do professional development is really contingent upon one of two things: how deep the bench is of people who can show them the way, and then the manager's capacity to actually teach that. If you don't have that, then you kind of have to hire into at least a certain level of pre-existing competency. But anybody can then say, we're going to bring in this person of a different generation, and we're going to engage in helping grow that person. Mm-hmm. And so that one is not limited. So you can still bring in, whether it's accountant or technologist or whatever the skill set is, and go, okay, that person brings in necessary levels of that, but we're going to use their time here to actually also grow them in these other areas.
What kind of training have you seen biggest bang for your buck? Whether your current team or in previous lives, where did you feel like you got your biggest return on investment that the typical, say, 20-person company or $5 million company could invest in? Because when you're really small, you're like, mm-hmm. I can hardly afford to go to Global Leadership Summit, and it's
right.
$150 a seat if I buy it early,
Right.
Let alone invest thousands of dollars in my team.
So there's different kind of training for different kind of outcomes. So I mean, luckily on things like leadership, you do got pretty price affordable things like GLS. That's super affordable. And you can do books, and you can do right now media, and you can get access to all kinds of stuff. I feel like the access to content has come way, way, way down. Mm-hmm. And so you can create a culture that says, hey, learning is normal here. Then where I've seen the biggest bang for buck, both in that big company experience and small ones, and this is true of all learning to some degree, is making sure you're matching that, whether if it's a skill or technical training, with a vision of like, what's the application, what's the outcome you want. I had a manager once who said, I was doing a bunch of Excel spreadsheets and doing a bunch of data stuff, and he said, hey, I want to put you through an Access database class. I don't know if you remember Microsoft Access back in the day. And I went, Microsoft Access? Like, I don't want to learn that. I'm not going to be a coder or a database designer. Like, what are you putting me through this? And he went, no. I want you to learn the way data works so that you can be more methodical in how you think about things and structure things. And you're probably going to work with IT people one day. And I want you to know just enough to not be an annoying customer where you don't get things, but also be dangerous enough that you can also sniff out like, that's doable. Like that's not true. And so he says, I'm putting this course. I want you to come and I want you to get better at this thing you're doing. But I want you to think about how does it change the way you think so you can lead in these future situations. If he had not told me that, if that was just I got to go learn a database class, it would have been boring. Mm-hmm. And I would have been like, why am I doing this? But I sat through the whole class going, okay, how will this help me become a better leader? Where could I use this knowledge in people I work with? And it served me tremendously. We put a number of people through like project management training or have them go learn a skill. Where we get the best bang for buck is when we put that in context to a vision, mm-hmm. and then have some sort of expectation of application. As
you were sharing that, putting it in context to a vision, one of the people on the planet that I'm closest to, boss, said, I want to send you to this class. Mm-hmm. And the initial response is, he must think I'm broken. Mm-hmm. Because he didn't set the context.
That's right.
And
Give
so
me a diet book. So I'm like, what are you saying?
And so I said, let me offer this paradigm. He sees something in you that he's willing to invest $14,000 or whatever crazy the number was. Yep. Not because you're broken.
Yep.
If he was concerned that you're broken, he'd let you go. Mm-hmm. He obviously sees that there's some potential in you, and he's hoping you're going to totally change their paradigm as they went through the class. And they came out on the other side of it, with all the fruit that was hoped for. Mm-hmm. But the leader fell short of saying, I see the value in you. He just assumed they would understand. He wouldn't spend those thousands of dollars unless he saw him as a contributor.
That's right.
He saw it as, hey, I'm promoting you by sending you. I could send anybody I want. I chose you. Right. So I get his perspective. But when they shared their perspective, I was like, oh, and that's what you just shared.
I made that same leadership failure numerous times. Like my best mentors did a better job than I do of painting that picture and explaining the why. And that changes how people metabolize those opportunities so much differently. I've got a number of people I put in our own program, key player programs and forums where peer learning. And when recommended for a leader, they're like, well, why? What's the piece? And like, well, I think every leader needs to be continuously learning. You don't know. And I want this to be normal. And our organization will only be as healthy as our leaders are. And so having to break down, like, hey, I'm going to invest in you being in an environment where you get to augment your learning by a bunch of other leaders over a journey, put that in a whole different light.
I see a twinkle in your eye when you think back about those mentors that invested in you. Same thing happens to me. There was, in corporate life, there was a VP that I say he mentored me, but not one-on-one. He made sure I was in the right place at the right time, cleared the way for me, literally came to my office one day and said, Gunn, why aren't you in class? I said, well, because my boss said no. He said, he works for me. I said, yes, get your in the class. So I did. I got up from, yes, sir, walked into the deal, participated. It was a week-long course. My boss was furious. I told you not to. I said, sir, you and he need to talk.
You go work that out, Mom and Dad.
But whenever I think of that season and that person, man was full of flaws, but he made sure to invest in me. So I think very highly of him to this day, and that was 30 years ago. And thankfully, in the last year or two, we've become friends again. And I spent more time with him in the last year than I did in probably 10 years that I worked for him.
Sure.
But I know from personal experience, and my parents were both professional educators. I see some of their students on Facebook decades later thanking them, even though they might have been with them for one school year, or in some cases 2 or 3. They still say they had an impact on my life. And so to me, it's a big deal when you say, I'm going to take part of my budget and I'm going to put you in one of these key player groups. One, because it's who we are, but 2, it's because I value you as a person. And I don't know how leaders convey that to their people, but if we could unlock that, and if we could find that budget, regardless of how small of a company or everybody watch a YouTube video together and talk about it over brown bag lunch or something, right? To me, it's a game changer, but it feels to me wholesale, not, and there's always great cases where this is not true, but wholesale, especially in this bad economy, one of the first things we throw out is training or investing in people. That seems to me like a big mistake.
And like I said, it can look, budget's not the issue, it's just intentionality. And then it's an invitation. So I think all the different people, I have so many people like your boss scenario. And I think to one of the guys who most maybe intentionally grew me as a leader in high school, I was in a rough situation, single mom, had a lot of chaos in our family, financial crisis. I didn't feel like I had a lot of things going up or out. And this youth pastor actually said, hey, I'm going to start investing in you. Like, hey, what does that look like? He's like, I'm going to buy you a coffee or a burger every couple of weeks. But here's the deal. Every time we do, he's like, I'll buy the coffee, but I'm going to bring you a book. And you got to read the book before our next meeting. And you got to come prepared to talk about how to apply that. And if you do that, we'll keep renewing it. And so he gave me a John Maxwell book, and then he gave me another book, and we, for a year and a half, did these lunch dates of read this, let's talk about it. And then he'd invite me into some sort of project to apply it. And that's simple. He never said, I'm going to mentor you into leadership. But he said, hey, I'd like to invest in you and helping you grow. And he showed an example of, and he was loaning me. It wasn't like I had to give the books back. It was his copy. He'd have his notes in the margin. So it's super low budget, but man, that shaped the whole way I thought about leadership for decades. And so whether it's, here's a book, hey, let's watch this, is that choosing to see people and say, I want to see them become someone better. I always tell people when we're hiring them, I stole the language from someone else. I hope you do a great job here, but I hope no matter whether you're here 3 years or 30 years, that 30 years from now you look back and go, I became a better person there. I grew because of that time there. And
I like it.
That requires us to keep asking questions. How do I help you grow?
Yeah. So, I'd love to hear your final thoughts, but I hope one of them would be, everybody always asks you, Mike, what are your favorite books, or what are you reading right now? Or so I'll give you a second to think about that. Maybe in context of what we've been discussing, or just nothing. It doesn't even have to be on this topic. And then I'd like to get your final thoughts around what you see in the next generation, kind of your excitement about that, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yes, I read a lot, so it's always. Recently, I did that Anxious Generation book. Was really compelling. It challenged me as a leader, as a parent, how I'm engaging this moment historically. So I recommend that. My team has reread the book, The Classic Leadership and Self-Deception by Arbinger Institute.
It's in my top 3, I think.
I just have to keep rereading that, and every time I reread it, I would always read it wanting to help someone else, and it's always like, oh, darn it, it's me again. Darn it.
I think I lost count of having gone through it 6 times. So
okay, so that should be on your list to read, everybody. So those are two good ones. I reread the Bible every year, and I try to read classics as well. Like make sure I'm keeping grounded in kind of timeless truth to then look at today's current reality.
That's good.
Again, I'm bullish on each generation. I look at this generation and go, okay, it doesn't like the idea of just mailing life in. It wants to make a difference, wants to create, has a natural appetite for justice and for making things right. It may not always know the right way to make things right, but it wants to make things right. Is agile, is able to adapt and pivot, and certainly going to be really well versed for technology and all those kind of things. All those things I see as being like raw material that's great for this next time. Doesn't know they don't know. Doesn't know the truth they don't know, but is hungry for it. And so I think that inner yearning, the Bible says God placed eternity in our hearts. There's a yearning for truth, goodness, rightness, love, human dignity, all those things. I go, that comes from God. And so if we can plug that God appetite with a God answer and then put some skills and formation and strength, I think that desire they have to want to change the world,
combination,
they can do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we got to grow them.
Well, Mike, thank you for your time. You've been a huge blessing to me in a season of my life where you were a big part of my formation. And so thank you for that. And look forward to maybe having you back on the show one of these days.
Sounds good.
Love you, brother.
Likewise.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of A Leader's Journey podcast. If you enjoyed it, give us a thumbs up and remember to subscribe to our channel.